When my cat called my ex while I was taking a shower, my cat accidentally triggered the emergency contact on my phone. 10 minutes later, my ex-boyfriend appeared at my bathroom door after receiving the distress call. I looked at him calmly. "Since you're already here, want to help me scrub my back?" I encountered my ex-boyfriend Dylan in my bathroom after we'd been broken up for a month. After our breakup, we deliberately avoided each other's schedules. Even though we lived in the same apartment building, we hadn't run into each other once. Our first meeting was at my bathroom door. I had just finished showering and was wrapped in a towel, about to leave the bathroom when the door suddenly swung open from outside. Dylan stood panting in the doorway, looking at me. "Are you okay?" After speaking, he glanced at the towel wrapped around me, his face flushing with embarrassment, even his ears turning red. Dylan quickly turned his head away. "I just got your call and received an emergency alert. When I couldn't reach you by phone, I panicked and came over. My door had an electronic lock, and I hadn't changed the code after our breakup, so it was normal for him to get in." Seeing him still standing awkwardly in the doorway, I raised an eyebrow. "If you're not leaving, want to help me scrub my back?" As expected, Dylan's face turned red, and he turned and walked away. I wrapped myself in the towel and went to my bedroom to change into pajamas, then headed to the living room. Dylan was crouched by the sofa, holding Mango and whispering something to him. Mango was the cat we used to raise together, a chubby orange tabby. My phone was lying next to Mango's paws. I walked over, and Dylan looked up at me. "It seems like while you were showering, Mango randomly pressed buttons." As he spoke, Dylan looked up at me, his gaze falling on my body with warm eyes. Honestly, I was nervous too. After more than a month since our breakup, facing this familiar yet slightly strange man, my palms were also sweating. I cleared my throat and deliberately reached toward Mango. "Mango, come to mommy." However, Mango looked up at me arrogantly, meowed once, but didn't move. The cat didn't move, and neither did Dylan. I silently cursed both of them, then bent down to pick up Mango. But as soon as I bent down, I missed completely. Mango nimbly jumped into Dylan's arms and even meowed at me. I muttered under my breath, "Truly, Dylan's cat, heartless just like him." The atmosphere was quiet for a while. Just as I was about to speak, Dylan's phone in his sweatpants pocket rang. Dylan held Mango with one hand and pulled out his phone with the other. We were sitting close enough that from my angle, I could see his phone screen. I glanced over and froze instantly. The contact name was somewhat intimate, Sugar. I knew her Dylan's childhood friend, whose real name was Sophie but nicknamed Sugar. Our breakup was somehow connected to her. Dylan hesitated for a moment, then hung up the call. But Sophie's message came through quickly. Dylan hesitated again, then opened the message. In that split second, I tilted my head and clearly saw the message on his phone screen. Sophie had sent just one line: "I'm pregnant. Will you take responsibility for me?" Seeing that line, I was stunned and quickly looked away. Dylan happened to look up at me, then hastily put away his phone. The atmosphere was extremely quiet. I looked at him casually. "Who was that?" I could see clearly panic flashed in his eyes. Then he responded quietly, "Nothing, just a friend." Dylan was never good at lying. All his emotions were written on his face. "Dylan, do you notice anything different about me today?" Dylan was stunned, then honestly turned to look at me. After looking me up and down, he shook his head honestly. "No." I picked up a cigarette from the coffee table, lit one. "Don't you think my head looks particularly green today?" Dylan's lips twitched. No matter how slow he was, he understood that I had seen that message. "Dylan." I grabbed his arm. "We've only been broken up for a month, and your childhood sweetheart is already pregnant with your baby. Tell me, am I green or not?" He was silent for a few seconds, then took the cigarette from my hand and took a drag himself. Dylan didn't smoke. As expected, he was choked by the smoke and coughed violently. After coughing, he held the cigarette tightly between his fingers, frowning at me. I can explain. Oh. I lit another cigarette and looked down at the table. Then you just need to answer one question. Did you sleep with her? The reflection in the turned-off TV screen showed my figure, appearing quite calm. But actually, my hand holding the cigarette was trembling slightly. I thought we broke up just because of personality differences. I didn't expect there was such a melodramatic twist. Dylan was silent for 2 seconds. He imitated me and took another drag, only coughing twice this time. I think so. You think? My hand holding the cigarette shook. You don't know whether you did it or not? Maya, that night. Dylan was about to explain, but after hearing just the beginning, I suddenly felt exhausted. Forget it, Dylan. I don't want to hear this. Go deal with your little sugar. The emergency call was probably Mango pressing buttons. I'm fine. Little Sugar was the nickname I gave Sophie. Dylan opened his mouth. Maybe my expression was too cold, because he ultimately said nothing and left. I had Sophie's contact info, but I'd blocked her from my social media since the day I added her because I didn't like her. After Dylan left, I curled up on the sofa in a daze. On impulse, I unblocked her social media. That night was restless. The next morning, I saw Sophie's post. It was Dylan's back. From the surroundings, it looked like they were at a hospital. Sophie's caption was one line, "With you here, I feel safe no matter what." Posted half an hour ago, and 2 minutes ago, Dylan had commented 3 words, "You're crazy." I stared at that comment for a long time, then quietly closed the app. Dylan was probably accompanying her to a prenatal checkup. I got up, washed, and got dressed to go out, only to realize it was Saturday. Saturday. If it were the past, Dylan and I would curl up on the sofa together making weekend plans. Maybe we'd take a spontaneous short trip or go see a newly released movie. The most memorable time was when I said I wanted a pulled pork sandwich on Saturday morning, and by noon that day, he had taken me on a flight to Memphis. I leaned against the door for a while before snapping back to reality. We'd been broken up for over a month, but today I suddenly felt like I'd just been dumped. I opened my phone and bought a movie ticket, planning to go shopping alone, see a movie, and then eat hot pot by myself. A solo weekend was relaxing, but somewhat boring. Especially when eating hot pot, when the server thoughtfully placed a giant stuffed animal across from me, it made me feel even more lonely. After getting tired from shopping, I took a cab home. After dinner, looking at my messy apartment, I decided to do a deep clean. However, I'd only half cleaned my closet when I found Dylan's clothes. It was his favorite shirt, light gray, a birthday gift I'd given him last year. After hesitating, I took the shirt and went out, planning to go upstairs to return it to Dylan. Actually, returning the shirt was an excuse wanting to see him was the truth. I wanted to see if he and Sophie were real or fake, whether they were actually together. But after knocking on his door upstairs for ages, no one was home. I clutched the shirt and went back home, tossing it on a chair and continuing my cleaning. I found several other items related to Dylan. Like his watch that he'd left at my place, sticky notes he'd secretly stuck behind the door. I was staring at the handwriting on the sticky notes when my phone suddenly buzzed. It was a notification text. I was going to swipe it away, but the content made me freeze instantly. It was Dylan's hotel booking confirmation. We'd booked this hotel online before, using my phone number, and I guess he forgot to change it. The message was clear a few minutes ago. Dylan had booked a king-size room. I stared for a long time, then smiled and threw my phone on the bed. After this little episode, I wasn't in the mood to clean anymore. I changed Mango's litter, took a shower, and crawled into bed. But after tossing and turning for almost half an hour, I still couldn't sleep. Suddenly, I wanted a drink, so I put on a jacket, planning to go to the convenience store downstairs for some beer. But as soon as I got off the elevator, I unexpectedly ran into Dylan. He was wearing a light brown jacket, the one I'd picked out when we went shopping together at the beginning of this year. Looking away, I tried to walk around him, but he stopped me. Maya. He frowned at me, his face showing concern. It's so late. Are you going out? He glanced at my pajamas. Is that any of your business? Thinking of that text message, anger flared in my chest. I felt inexplicably annoyed, and sarcastic words slipped out. Next time you take your little sweetheart to a hotel, please don't use your ex-girlfriend's phone number. Dylan was clearly stunned. After the shock, he hurriedly explained, You misunderstood. Her apartment's electrical system broke down. The electrician won't come until tomorrow morning. She had nowhere to go tonight, so I helped her book a room. I just dropped her off and came back. I keenly caught every detail accompanying her to the hospital for checkups, and now booking her a hotel room. So? I pulled my jacket tighter and looked up at him. So the baby really is yours? Dylan fell silent. Maybe he didn't know that in those few seconds of silence, my heart sank bit by bit. I knew him too well. From his furrowed brow and the downward curve of his lips, I understood the answer. After a moment, Dylan spoke, not answering directly but softly apologizing. Maya, I'm sorry. I gripped my clothes tighter and laughed bitterly. You said too much. Dylan looked confused. You don't need to say those 5 words euphemistically. You just need to say one word, yes. Dylan didn't speak. Having gotten my answer, I didn't want to talk to him anymore. I pulled my clothes tight and left. When I walked out of the apartment complex gate, I glanced over and saw Dylan following behind me. He was about 10 meters away, following at a distance. Not sure if he was following me or just going out, I didn't say anything and turned left into the convenience store. When I came out carrying a bag of beer and some snacks, I immediately saw Dylan standing at the door. Our eyes met, and he pressed his lips together. I'll walk you back. I didn't respond and walked around him again, quickly heading back to the complex. Behind me, Dylan followed step by step. Passing under a streetlight, I turned and quickly glanced at him. In that brief look, I still saw his tightly pressed lips and furrowed brow. He was always reserved and stubborn. When we used to fight, I would sometimes storm out angrily. But no matter how far I walked, as long as I turned around, I could always see him frowning and silently following behind me. Remembering the past made my heart ache even more, so I quickened my pace, trying to shake him off. But when I got to the elevator, Dylan still caught up. In the elevator, besides us, there was a little girl holding a cat. To distract myself, I bent down to look at the cat in the little girl's arms. However, the cat was very well behaved and didn't make a sound the entire time. The little girl also never spoke. At the 14th floor, the little girl got off with her cat, walking very lightly. As they left, I waved at the cat and softly said goodbye. But then I heard Dylan's voice behind me. Who are you talking to? I froze instantly. A chill ran down my spine. I quickly pressed myself against the elevator wall and turned to look at him. You! Can't see them? Maybe I looked too panicked, because Dylan couldn't help but laugh softly. I can see them. I was just messing with you. Just then, the elevator stopped at the 15th floor. Dylan glanced at the plastic bag in my hand. Drinking alone is no fun. Let me have a couple beers with you? He reached out to hold the elevator door open. I hesitated but didn't respond, turning to exit the elevator and letting Dylan walk me to my door. I felt relieved, but after opening the door, I quickly slipped inside and shut the door behind me, keeping Dylan outside. Mr. Peterson, thank you for walking me home. Please go back now. I called through the crack in the door. What a joke. I didn't want to get entangled with an ex-boyfriend who was about to become a father. I pressed my ear to the door, listening for movement outside, but heard nothing. Was he gone already? I couldn't help but look through the peephole. Dylan was standing right at the door. He stood quietly, his expression unclear, until the hallway lights went out. I hesitated for a moment, but thinking of Sophie's message about being pregnant, I steeled my heart and turned back to my bedroom. Taking off my jacket and kicking off my slippers, I buried myself under the covers, wrapping myself tightly. What a fake romantic act. He was just a cheating scumbag. Forcing myself not to think about him, but my thoughts seemed out of control, so I got up again, barefoot, and went to the living room to bring the beer back to my room. I spent the whole night learning how much beer it takes to forget Dylan, just 5 bottles. I have a low alcohol tolerance. After 5 beers, I was curled up in bed, completely wasted. The next day I woke up, looked at the vomit in the trash can by my bed, and made a firm decision: let the past with Dylan stay in the past. But as I was leaving for work, I ran into Dylan in the elevator. The elevator came down from upstairs. The moment the doors opened, Dylan and I inadvertently made eye contact. My foot that was about to step forward froze. After hesitating for a few seconds, the other people in the elevator were already getting impatient. Coming to my senses, I softly said, "Sorry," and turned to walk into the stairwell. I hurried downstairs, originally worried that Dylan might wait for me at the first-floor stairwell. Fortunately, he didn't. When I got downstairs, it was empty. I couldn't tell what I was feeling. I left quickly. For the next period, I threw all my energy into work, voluntarily working overtime, keeping myself incredibly busy so I wouldn't have time to think about those upsetting things. It proved quite effective. I was working myself to the bone and had no time to think about that scumbag Dylan or the childhood sweetheart pregnant with my ex-boyfriend's baby. Plus, the benefits of overtime became apparent. If I calculated correctly, this month I might earn several thousand extra dollars, enough for a short trip. That evening, I was working overtime at the company until after 9 p.m. Just as I was about to pack up and leave, I ran into my boss, Ryan, who had just come out of his office. Everyone knew our boss was young, promising, single, and available, the top target for all the girls in the company. Ryan was holding a folder and stopped by my desk as he passed. "Why are you working so hard lately?" He leaned against the desk with one hand, his tone casual, like small talk. I packed my things while smiling and giving a casual excuse. "Nothing special, just a bit short on cash lately." His curved fingers tapped on the desk lightly. "If you have any difficulties, tell me. Just name the amount you need." I looked up at him. Before I could speak, Ryan added appropriately, "Don't worry, if any employee has difficulties, the company will support them." I nodded quickly. See, what a good company. What a good boss. After chatting for a bit, I had finished packing. Ryan looked at me. "How are you getting home?" "Subway." He moved his hand from my desk, his voice as low and pleasant as always. "Let me give you a ride." "It's on my way." I was stunned and quickly declined. Seeing my refusal, he didn't insist, just reminded me to be safe and left. I deliberately lingered in the office a bit longer before leaving the company. However, I miscalculated. I'd been so focused on overtime work that I hadn't noticed it was raining heavily outside. I couldn't get a rideshare, and all the taxis were occupied. I didn't bring an umbrella and could only hide under a bus stop, sheltering from rain while waiting in the rideshare queue. Suddenly, a black car stopped in front of me. As I looked up, the window slowly rolled down. It was my boss, Ryan. Our eyes met, and he raised an eyebrow. "Get in." I hesitated, but pathetically got in the car. Given this rain, I'd either wait another half hour or get soaked. Sitting in the passenger seat, I buckled my seatbelt and quietly thanked him. Ryan glanced at me sideways, one hand on the steering wheel, and suddenly smiled. Come on, there are no outsiders here. We're old classmates. Is it necessary to be so formal? Right. My boss Ryan and I were actually high school classmates, but except for the two of us, no one else in the company knew. Because I wanted to get promoted based purely on my own abilities, I didn't want people to think I was getting ahead through connections. I looked at the increasingly heavy rain outside and smiled. Not being formal, just maintaining professional boundaries. After a while, Ryan sighed. After all these years, still the same, so stubborn. Yes. I'd been famously stubborn since childhood, about everything, including relationships. Seeing I wasn't talking, Ryan shook his head and focused on driving. The company wasn't too far from my home, and since it wasn't rush hour, Ryan had the car parked outside my apartment complex within 10 minutes. The complex parking was full, so temporary cars couldn't enter. Ryan could only park outside. He frowned. I don't have an umbrella in the car. It's fine. I unbuckled my seatbelt while looking at the rain outside. I'll just run for it. I opened the car door. Drive carefully on your way back. As soon as I finished speaking, I had already rushed into the rain. From the complex entrance to my building was about a 2-minute run. I was definitely going to catch a cold tonight. But then I heard a car door slam behind me, and suddenly, the rain above my head stopped. I looked up, it was a suit jacket. My nostrils filled with a faint mint scent. I turned to see Ryan. He was much taller than me, currently frowning with a somewhat displeased tone. The company's been busy lately. I can't give you sick leave if you catch a cold tomorrow. He held the jacket over my head. Let's go. At this point, refusing would seem too pretentious, so I could only quicken my pace and enter the complex with him. All the way, Ryan protected me well. By the time we entered my building's lobby, I hadn't gotten wet at all. But he was soaked more than half, his body was drenched. How did you get so wet? I felt bad looking at his clothes. Want to come up and change? I happen to have a new set of clothes I bought for my dad, but haven't mailed to him yet. It's fine. Ryan casually brushed at his clothes. I won't go up. It's too late, and it wouldn't be appropriate for a single woman. He shook the water off his jacket. You go up. I'm heading home. I didn't insist and nodded, quietly thanking him. However, just as the word thanks left my lips, someone else pushed through the door. I instinctively turned to look and froze instantly. What a small world. The two people who had just entered with an umbrella were Dylan and his current girlfriend, Sophie. Dylan's current state was similar to Ryan's. His gray jacket was soaked through by the rain. It looked like he had given the umbrella entirely to his little girlfriend. Inexplicably, I remembered rainy days when we were together. Every time we shared an umbrella going out, Dylan's clothes would always be half wet when we got home. A friend had secretly photographed us once. Dylan, holding the umbrella, always tilted it toward my side, while more than half his body was in the rain. Coming back to reality, I suddenly realized that the person he was now holding an umbrella for wasn't me anymore. Suppressing the sourness in my heart, I was about to casually tell Ryan to drive carefully when Sophie suddenly walked over quickly. Maya, is this your boyfriend? She looked Ryan up and down, her gaze lingering for several seconds on the expensive watch on Ryan's wrist, then smiled and said, Maya, your boyfriend is handsome, thoughtful, young, and successful. I'm so envious. I laughed coldly inside. Envious? So this envy meant she wanted to steal my leftovers again? But while I found her words hypocritical, her expression actually seemed quite sincere. I was silent for a few seconds. Maybe Dylan's gaze was too intense, but I ultimately didn't deny it, just nodded and said indifferently, Lucky me. Then I linked arms with Ryan and turned toward the elevator. Ryan was quite cooperative. Before leaving, he even glanced at Dylan, his lips curving in a gentlemanly yet smug smile. Just as the elevator doors were about to close, I finally looked away from inside and glanced outside. Through the gap, I happened to meet Dylan's eyes. His brow was tightly furrowed, his face extremely unpleasant, like someone had stolen his wife. How precious. Could it be that all men are like this? Not cherishing what they have, then playing the possessive ex-boyfriend after losing it? Fortunately, Dylan stood outside with clenched fists, but ultimately didn't chase after us. Soon, the elevator stopped at the 15th floor. Ding, the doors opened, and Ryan looked at me sideways. "All right, little coward, you can let go now." Being called little coward startled me. It took 2 seconds to react, and I quickly let go. In school, Ryan used to call me little coward. He always said I was somewhat cowardly and liked to avoid things. But actually, I was quite fierce in school, never lost a fight, and could curse for half an hour straight without repeating myself. I even made the queen bee from the next class cry several times. Despite this, Ryan still said I was cowardly. Later, I belatedly realized that the cowardice he referred to was probably about relationships. This guy was quite narcissistic. He always thought I had a secret crush on him, but was too scared to confess. Even when I coincidentally ended up working at his company, he thought I had worked up the courage to confess and was deliberately getting close to him. I guess when he used to call me little coward, he probably thought I was too scared to express my love for him. After getting off the elevator, I looked at his wet clothes clinging to his body. After hesitating, I said quietly, "Boss, maybe you should. Stay at my place for the night?" He looked down at himself, was silent for 2 seconds, then said quietly, "Staying over wouldn't be appropriate, a man and woman alone. But I might need to borrow your hairdryer to dry my clothes." Hearing this, I glanced at his clothes. Of course, he needed to dry his clothes with such heavy rain. This guy was soaked through. His underwear was probably wet too. After I opened the door, Ryan followed me in, changed into slippers, and went straight to the bathroom. Soon, I could hear the hairdryer running inside. I shuffled around in slippers, making him tea, but my thoughts had already drifted far away in the fragrant steam. Thinking about seeing Sophie and Dylan standing side by side, thinking about Sophie's completely dry clothes and Dylan's soaked appearance. My heart felt sour. I sat on the sofa, lost in thought for a long time, until Ryan came out of the bathroom. He walked to the sofa and glanced at the tea on the coffee table, raising an eyebrow slightly. "For me?" Seeing me nod, Ryan picked up the now warm tea and took a sip. Glancing at me, Ryan spoke with certainty. "What's wrong? Still can't get over your ex-boyfriend?" I looked away. I forgot about him long ago. "Then why are you still living here, making yourself miserable every time you see him?" Ryan put down his teacup. "The company will pay to rent you an apartment near the office. How about it?" Before I could refuse, Ryan added, "Don't worry. All employees who rent have subsidies, not just you." I looked up, puzzled. How come I didn't know about this? Ryan took another sip of tea and said casually, "Because this policy will only be announced tomorrow." I shook my head and refused. This apartment still had 3 months left on the lease. Honestly, I was reluctant to give up 3 months of rent and the security deposit. Seeing my refusal, Ryan didn't say more. He checked his watch, finished the tea, and got up to leave. I walked him to the door and noticed that Ryan's clothes and pants were actually still half dry. He waved his hand, told me to lock the door tonight, and quickly left. I watched him get into the elevator before closing the door. Actually, I wasn't particularly obtuse about relationships. I could tell Ryan liked me. I just couldn't reciprocate. Even though Dylan was a scumbag, I still couldn't let go of him in such a short time. Feelings are often beyond our control. Not long after Ryan left, there was a knock at the door. I went to look through the peephole. It was Dylan standing outside. I didn't want to open the door, but seeing him soak through the peephole, I ultimately softened and opened it. "What do you want?" Dylan didn't answer, but looked past me into the room. "He's gone." "What are you looking at?" I said displeasedly, one hand gripping the door handle, blocking the doorway completely. Dylan seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. He looked at me quietly and explained in a low voice, "I was afraid you'd misunderstand. Sophie's apartment is flooded. I took her to my place to settle her in temporarily, then I was going to get a hotel room to sleep." He spoke faster, seeming somewhat anxious. "Really, and I didn't share an umbrella with her. She's pregnant, so I gave her the umbrella and I ran back in the rain." I found it amusing. Leaning against the door, I looked up at him and timely reminded him, "Dylan, you two already have a child together. Does sharing an umbrella really matter?" Dylan indeed fell silent. A few seconds later, he spoke in a hoarse voice. "Maya, I don't have much to defend myself with, but I've thought about it for a long time. I should at least explain the situation from that incident." I didn't respond, leaning against the door and lighting a cigarette. To be honest, I was indeed somewhat curious. In the swirling smoke, Dylan spoke low. "A month ago at our friend's reunion party, everyone got drunk, except Sophie, who didn't drink because she wasn't feeling well. Later, I vaguely remember that Jake and I were drunk, and Sophie brought us back to her place. She only has one bedroom, so Jake and I slept in the bedroom while Sophie slept on the couch. But the next morning when I woke up, he appropriately stopped talking, but the atmosphere became awkward. After finishing my cigarette, I stubbed it out and looked up at him. So what? Dylan, isn't this just a simple story of drunken mistakes? Dylan opened his mouth but ultimately didn't speak. I've heard your explanation. You can go now, Dylan. Since we broke up, we broke up. Can't we leave each other some dignity? Next time we meet, let's just treat each other as strangers. Congratulations in advance on your baby. After saying this, I decisively closed the door. This scene felt familiar just a few days ago. He had been driven away from my door. After all this back and forth, I felt exhausted too. Thinking of Ryan's words earlier, I went back to my bedroom and started packing. 4 months of rent wasn't worth continuing this mutual torture. I declined Ryan's offer to provide company employee rental benefits and rented a place near the company myself. 1 bedroom, 1 living room, clean and bright. The afternoon I signed the contract, I hired a moving company to go back with me. As expected, during the move, we encountered Dylan again. I thought he would rush over to say something, but he didn't. He just stood quietly to the side, silently watching the movers take away furniture he was familiar with. Dylan used to hate the smell of cigarettes, but that day I counted while the movers went back and forth moving furniture. He stood outside the building entrance and smoked 5 cigarettes. From beginning to end, we didn't say a word to each other. Like I said that evening, we were like 2 strangers, silently watching this farewell. Following the moving truck as we left together, I thought, let everything end here. All the past romance, the cheating, the childhood sweetheart. Let it all end here. However, you can't stop the wind from blowing just because the tree wants to be still. My life had barely separated from Dylan when I witnessed an indescribable scene. While passing a budget hotel, I unexpectedly saw Sophie with a man who wasn't Dylan, but her scumbag ex-boyfriend. About 6 months ago, I'd met him when accompanying Dylan to dinner with his friends. I heard them say privately that Sophie's ex-boyfriend was a real scumbag, basically a... Wasn't Sophie pregnant with Dylan's child? What was this soap opera twist? Moreover, Sophie was practically hanging all over him, completely ignoring other people's stares. With that clingy behavior, they definitely weren't going to the hotel to play cards. I stood outside the hotel, lit a cigarette, and hesitated for a while before finally calling Dylan. I'd deleted his contact info, but I still remembered the number by heart. The phone was answered immediately, and I heard Dylan's voice with a slightly upward inflection, a sign he was somewhat excited. "Maya, what's wrong?" I took a drag of my cigarette. "I have something to tell you, not sure if I should." Dylan seemed stunned. "Tell me." "I saw Sophie with her ex-boyfriend going into a hotel." Silence on the other end. During his silence, I continued. "The location is the Express Hotel on Tangyan Road. I don't know the room number." After a while, Dylan responded quietly, "Okay. I understand. Thank you." His voice was murky, probably somewhat humiliated. I didn't know what else to say and hung up. Actually, I didn't know if I should have said anything, but I felt that being cheated on was bad enough. Being kept in the dark might be even more pitiful. But after hanging up, I regretted it a bit. Such a busybody. Just a few days ago, I said we should treat each other as strangers when we meet, and today I actively called to tell him about being cheated on. I silently cursed myself and turned to leave. I didn't know how things developed between Dylan and Sophie. Having deleted all contact information, I had no way to know about their situation. However, I only knew that. After confirming I was single again, Ryan started pursuing me. He was a very gentlemanly person, always considerate of my feelings, keeping everything just right. When he saw I was refusing, he stopped mentioning pursuit and instead subtly showed his care for me in daily life. To be honest, Ryan was great, so excellent that when he said he liked me, everyone's first reaction was that he was blind. Actually, I thought so too. Ryan was outstanding in appearance and conditions. Even in the demanding world of blind dates, he would be quite exceptional. There was really no need for him to waste effort on an ordinary girl who had just been dumped. I told him this, but Ryan didn't respond to these comments. Instead, he took the cigarette from my hand and took a drag himself. "Smoke less, it's bad for your health." In terms of relationships, he selectively covered his ears. All my rejections, he ignored completely. Ryan was especially good to me, so good that I couldn't handle it, so I submitted a resignation letter. That day, I was called to his office. With the door closed, Ryan leaned against his desk, looking dejected. His fingers gently caressed the resignation letter as he looked up at me. "Are you so eager to escape from me?" I shook my head. "I just don't want you to waste time on me." I lowered my voice, speaking as directly as possible. "Ryan, you're really great, but we're truly not compatible. Continuing like this would just be a waste." "Just a waste of time, right?" Ryan covered his forehead with one hand, interrupting me. Seeing me nod, Ryan laughed softly. "But I have plenty of time, and I'm willing to waste it on you." "But," I spoke softly, looking straight into his eyes, "I'm not willing." These words might have been cruel, but I had to say them. I hadn't completely let go of my ex, and dragging this out would just be meaningless consumption. I knew Ryan had always been proud. I didn't need to give him long speeches. These 4 words were enough. Sure enough, Ryan froze the moment I said those words. After a while, he pressed his lips together slightly, then turned his head away and laughed. In that moment, when he turned away, I saw his eyes completely red. He laughed, pressing his fingertips to his forehead and rubbing. "Maya, you really don't leave people any room at all." I looked at him apologetically without responding. There really was no room to leave in this kind of situation. Ryan waved his hand, his voice suddenly becoming hoarse. "All right, go back to work. I'm not accepting the resignation letter. Focus on your work from now on." I hesitated for a moment, then turned to leave. However, when I reached the door, I heard Ryan's low voice behind me. "Maya, if you change your mind, come find me anytime." I paused, my heart inexplicably aching because of his words. Okay. 1 month after I spotted Sophie and her ex-boyfriend at the hotel, Sophie had a miscarriage. I heard this from Dylan's friend. Sophie had been having an unclear on and off relationship with her ex-boyfriend. But that guy really wasn't anything good playing around with his pregnant ex-girlfriend while spending Sophie's money. Yet Sophie remained devoted to him, reluctant to let go. Until yesterday, when Sophie's scumbag ex-boyfriend got violent with her after she refused to give him money while he was drunk. He hit her too hard, directly causing the miscarriage. After being sent to the hospital, Sophie also had heavy bleeding symptoms and had to be hospitalized. Sophie had no parents to begin with, just an elderly grandmother in the countryside. The violent ex-boyfriend who caused this had long since disappeared, so poor Dylan had to step up again, paying for her hospitalization and taking care of her. Good Lord, hearing this gossip made me applaud even TV dramas wouldn't dare write this plot. It might sound cruel, but honestly, when I learned about Sophie's miscarriage, I genuinely felt relieved. Now, Dylan no longer had the burden of a child and didn't need to be responsible for Sophie anymore. If he came looking for me, would I reconcile with him? I originally thought I would be willing. But when I was actually thinking about the answer, with my mind completely blank, my answer seemed to go against my imagination. Suddenly, my phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Ryan calling. "Hello," I answered cheerfully. After a 2-second pause, Ryan's voice came through low. "You're in a good mood today?" "Not bad. There's a fireworks show at the plaza tonight. Want to go together?" I was about to close the window when I glanced down and saw a familiar figure leaning against a car downstairs. Holding a cigarette between his fingers, phone pressed to his ear, it was Ryan. I quietly watched him for a few seconds. "Boss, you're already downstairs." Can I really say no? Downstairs, Ryan seemed startled, then quickly looked up. My rental was on the 3rd floor. From about 10 meters high, we made eye contact. Ryan curled his lips slightly. "I'll wait for you downstairs." After quickly getting ready, I hurried downstairs. After work, Ryan had taken off his suit and changed into casual clothes. This 30-something man, wearing light casual clothes, surprisingly had an indescribable youthful quality. Without much conversation, I sat in Ryan's passenger seat and drove with him to the plaza. The People's Plaza was crowded, the lights were beautiful, and the fireworks display was even more beautiful. There were many young couples around, holding hands and looking up at the fireworks. Ryan and I stood side by side. When the fireworks lit up the sky, I took out my phone to photograph the sky, then posted to social media, "The fireworks are beautiful, and so is the future." In the bottom left corner of the photo, I accidentally captured half of Ryan's profile. About 2 minutes after posting, someone I'd never talked to liked it. We'd never chatted, and I hadn't given him a nickname. The user ID was X. I knew it was Dylan's alternate account. I stared at that like for a few seconds, smiled, and exited the app to look up at the sky. Another firework bloomed in the night sky, so beautiful it was impossible to look away. Among the bustling crowd, I gazed at the sky and whispered softly, "So beautiful." Ryan's voice came from beside me. "Very beautiful." But I wasn't looking at Ryan. And Ryan wasn't looking at the sky. A few days later, I unexpectedly received a call from Sophie. On the phone, her voice was still somewhat weak, but her tone was particularly sincere. "Maya, could you come to my hospital room at noon today? I have something I want to tell you." I frowned and thought for a while, then finally agreed. What defeated me was my damned curiosity. I was very curious about what a patient who had just miscarried urgently wanted to tell me. So at 1230 p.m., I appeared on time at the hospital room door she had told me about. I knocked on the door with my knuckles, and Dylan's voice quickly came from inside. "Come in!" I was startled. then pushed the door open. The moment he saw me, Dylan, who had been sitting in a chair, immediately stood up. Maya. While Dylan was looking at me, I was also examining him. He looked much more haggard. Dylan, who used to meticulously shave every day, now had blue stubble on his chin and dark circles under his eyes. From my angle, I could even clearly see the red blood vessels in his eyes. After a few seconds of eye contact, I casually looked away and turned towards Sophie on the hospital bed. "What's the matter?" I had no intention of wasting time with them, so I got straight to the point. Sophie's gaze moved back and forth between Dylan and me. After a long time, she sighed and said quietly, "The baby is gone, and I've completely given up. It's time to give you both a real answer." I frowned, silently pondering the meaning of her words. So? There were still hidden details in all this? I looked up at Dylan. He was frowning, his eyes also full of confusion. Sophie gripped the bedsheets tightly with both hands and calmly told us everything. All of her lies. When Sophie sent Dylan that message, she hadn't just discovered she was pregnant, she was already more than 2 months pregnant. The child belonged to her scumbag ex-boyfriend. After learning about the pregnancy, the scumbag gave her the cold shoulder and broke up, then disappeared. This left the love-struck Sophie, who was still devoted to him, alone with the unformed child in her womb. As it turned out, Sophie wasn't just love-struck, she was also overflowing with maternal love. Even with the father gone, this orphan without a proper job still wanted to give birth to the child and, moreover, wanted to find a reliable father for the baby. In other words, she wanted to find an honest man to take over. When she got to this part, Sophie chokingly said that she originally hadn't thought about targeting people around her, until that day. That day at their friend's gathering, everyone got drunk. Because she was pregnant, she didn't drink alcohol, just 2 glasses of warm water. Later, when everyone was drunk, she could only bring the completely wasted Jake and Dylan back to her place. She let Jake and Dylan sleep in the only bedroom while she slept on the couch. However, in the middle of the night, Jake was called away by his girlfriend's frantic phone calls, leaving only Dylan in the bedroom. Sophie woke up in the middle of the night and heard noises from Dylan's room. Worried, she went to check and found that Dylan had woken up at night and vomited all over himself. In his confusion, he had taken off his dirty clothes and pants, then gone back to sleep on the bed. Sophie had no choice but to take the dirty clothes to the bathroom to wash them. However, after hanging up the clothes, when Sophie was about to close Dylan's bedroom door, she suddenly had a bold idea. Because of this idea, when Dylan woke up the next day, he was wearing only his underwear, while Sophie, in a slip nightgown, was lying in his bed. Through Sophie's lies, Dylan thought he had done something foolish while drunk. The rest followed naturally. Dylan knew I had a psychological cleanliness obsession and couldn't tolerate any betrayal. He really couldn't bring himself to tell me about this, and just when he finally worked up the courage to mention it, I happened to have a big fight with him about his recent closeness to Sophie. Fighting and fighting, we broke up. If not for that emergency contact incident, I might never have known about Sophie's pregnancy until now. After Dylan believed that incident happened, Sophie waited a full month before sending him the pregnancy message, asking if he would take responsibility. Going around in circles, she just wanted to find a reliable, steady father for the child in her womb. Quite ridiculous. According to Sophie, that social media post she made at the hospital was deliberately for me to see. The reason was simple. She didn't want me and Dylan to get back together and wanted to solidify Dylan's position as the sucker. The cause and effect were actually simple. After unraveling everything, it was just a story of an abandoned woman who used scheming to find an honest man to take over. The only accident in this process was probably Sophie's ex-boyfriend coming back. The scumbag ex-boyfriend returned to her, coaxing her to take Dylan's money to spend on him. Dylan was a very qualified sucker. perhaps feeling guilty about what he thought he'd done. Although he always kept his distance from Sophie, he didn't stint on the money. Sophie wavered and hesitated between two men. She couldn't let go of her scumbag ex-boyfriend, but knew he was extremely unreliable. For the sake of her unborn child's future, she didn't want to give up Dylan, who had good conditions. Until the scumbag hit her and she lost the baby, Sophie finally gave up completely. However, what really made her decide to tell everything was last night. Last night, after I posted that fireworks photo, Sophie woke up in the middle of the night and accidentally saw Dylan sitting on the caregiver's bed. Dylan with red, teary eyes. He sat by the caregiver's bed, clutching his phone tightly, and on the lit screen was my photo. At this point in the story, Sophie's eyes also reddened. Dylan and I have been friends since childhood. If it weren't for the baby in my belly, I wouldn't have done such a foolish thing. Now I have nothing left, and I can't bear to watch him continue suffering. Everything was my fault, and what happened to me now is karma. Maya, you can hit me or scold me. I just hope that now that the misunderstanding is cleared up, you two can reconcile. Really. From beginning to end, I listened to this whole process with a frown. After hearing it all, I just wanted to curse. Really? Normal people couldn't do something like this. You can't trust Sophie. She'd really screw over a childhood friend. The only happy person in this hospital room was probably Dylan. He listened to everything in a daze, then turned to look at me with surprise. Maya, it was all a misunderstanding. He didn't finish the second half of his sentence, but the meaning was obvious enough. This guy was naturally a sucker. At this moment, he felt no anger about being deceived and kept in the dark. The first thing he thought of was that we could get back together. I looked at him for a long time, then sighed softly. Dylan, do you still think? The only obstacle between us was that incident? Dylan froze. Wasn't it? I looked at him quietly. This person who had once been such a familiar other half now felt strange to me. No. It's because you're cowardly, because you're timid and afraid to face things. Dylan, throughout this entire relationship, you never once faced problems with the most resolute attitude. I took a deep breath and continued. That incident, just because you blacked out from drinking and woke up in a bed, you believed her story and subconsciously started avoiding the issue. You didn't even try to verify whether anything actually happened that night. You were certain everything had happened, but didn't have the courage to confess to me. You didn't even have the courage to actively break up with me. You used our fight as an excuse for cold treatment, forcing me to be the one to suggest breaking up. Even later, when I found out you two had a child, you still hesitated and wouldn't give me a clear explanation. From our breakup to when I moved away from this neighborhood, every time you only came to me with lukewarm explanations, only stood outside my door asking to meet. Even if I had met with you then, what could you have done? Asked Sophie to abort the child? Or honestly told me about that night, apologized, and made a clean break? Dylan, I looked at him, and with each word I spoke, my impression of this man crumbled a little more. You couldn't do any of those things. You didn't dare face these problems. The person you love most is only yourself. Dylan and I were separated by a hospital bed. He looked at me quietly, his eyes completely red, opening his mouth but unable to say a word. After waiting a long time for his response, I smiled and turned to leave. What Sophie did, I didn't want to say much about. The scumbag was gone, the child was lost, and due to complications during the miscarriage, she might have difficulty getting pregnant again in the future. Karma was right in front of us. As for Dylan, it was only now that I suddenly realized that what lay between us wasn't just that child. I had loved him, that was true. But when I suggested breaking up, feeling that we weren't right for each other, that was also true. When I reached the door, Dylan's voice suddenly came from behind me, Maya. I stopped. behind me?" he asked softly, his voice trembling slightly. "Are you with him now?" 0. 6. I was startled for a moment before realizing that the him Dylan was referring to should be Ryan. "No." I placed my hand on the door handle, and Ryan's face suddenly appeared before my eyes. I pressed down slightly and opened the door. "But if there's a chance in the future, maybe we will be." After saying this, I closed the door and left. The moment I walked out of the hospital, I took out my phone and blocked Dylan's last remaining social media account. This time, it was really over. Epilogue. After leaving the hospital that day, my life completely returned to peace. And Dylan truly disappeared completely from my life. I knew that those past times, those days we walked through together, wouldn't disappear because of this, but they really gradually became the past. I would think of them at some unexpected moments, would space out because of remembering certain details, and would suddenly feel some regret at certain times. But that was all. I understood Dylan, his not appearing in my life anymore, meant he was also gradually letting go of this past. In this world, coming and going is normal. When one person leaves, there will always be another to take their place. And the person who replaced Dylan in my world was Ryan. In the past, I always thought Ryan was a very aloof person, always serious with a straight face. Faced with the endless stream of admirers at the company, he never gave them a second glance. But later, I discovered he was a gentle and very tolerant person. In the past, Dylan gave me the feeling of a bright moon, clean and gentle. Even after being together for a long time, he would still blush from my deliberate teasing. But Ryan gave me the feeling of an ocean. He could see through everything and tolerate everything. No matter what choices you made or where you went, he would always quietly wait in the same place. But we still hadn't taken that final step. He was waiting for me, and I was waiting for my heart to give me an answer. Actually, Ryan was right when it came to relationships. I was a particularly cowardly person, cowardly and stubborn. For me, the hardest thing was taking the first step. But I didn't expect that this step between Ryan and me would be so simple, just because he got jealous. On Saturday morning, my mom dragged me out of bed and forced me to go to a coffee shop to meet a blind date. Unable to argue with her, I thought I'd just go through the motions, then come back and explain to my mom that we weren't compatible. However, what I didn't expect was that my blind date would be Dylan, whom I hadn't seen in days. We were both stunned for a while when we saw each other. My mom didn't know why we broke up. Seeing that I hadn't found a boyfriend for so long, she thought I couldn't get over Dylan, so she asked Aunt Lee to accidentally run into Dylan and persuade him to come on this blind date. What a roundabout rescue operation! After staring at each other for a long time, we both smiled. I thought seeing Dylan again would stir up many emotions, but there really weren't any. We calmly asked about each other's recent lives, then both fell into silence. The weather wasn't great today. The sky was heavily overcast. During the silence, I glanced out the window. It was raining. The drizzle inexplicably made me feel somewhat depressed. I didn't want to stay any longer and was about to say goodbye and leave when Dylan suddenly grabbed my hand. We both froze. The next second, Dylan quickly withdrew his hand and cleared his throat. Wait a moment. He took off a necklace from around his neck with a ring hanging on it. I looked carefully and couldn't help but be stunned. It was a woman's diamond ring I had once admired in a mall. Dylan removed the ring and gently rubbed it between his fingers, then looked up at me. This is the ring I bought before we broke up. I was planning to use it when I proposed, but then... Dylan smiled softly, then held the ring out in front of me. This was originally meant for you. I never had the chance before, so it stayed with me for a while. Now, returning it to its rightful owner. I stared blankly at the ring in front of me, exquisitely crafted with a brilliant diamond, clearly very expensive. This was my once favorite style. I had secretly gone to the mall to look at it more than once. But now, when it was actually in front of me, I found I didn't really want it anymore. Maybe people change. Coming back to my senses, I was about to speak when I had a premonition and turned to look out the window. On the rainy street, through a glass window, I actually saw Ryan. Outside, light rain was pattering down. He wore a black trench coat, no umbrella, just standing quietly outside the window looking at us. Our eyes met, and Ryan smiled at me. Before I could react, he turned and walked a few steps to a black sedan, bent down, and got in the car. I didn't come back to my senses until the car left. Looking away, I pushed Dylan's hand away. No need, Dylan. Return it if you can. This ring is too expensive. I won't accept it. Dylan frowned slightly. Maya, don't worry. I don't mean to pester you. I just think this ring should be given to you. It was prepared for you originally. I smiled, picked up my phone, and stood up. I believe in cause and effect. Since this ring wasn't given out originally, there must be a reason for that. Sorry for making you come here for nothing today. I'll explain everything clearly to my mom when I get back. Dylan looked at me for a while, then sighed softly and shook his head. It's fine. As I was about to leave, Dylan suddenly asked softly, Maya, do we really have to be like this? I had already stood up, then turned to look at him. Could we get back together? Dylan was stunned by this question, then slowly shook his head. Yes, we both know in our hearts that we won't get back together. If not like this, then how else? I said goodbye to Dylan and slowly left the coffee shop. Actually, I knew Dylan was innocent. From beginning to end, he was the one being played by Sophie. Dylan was innocent, and so was I, but this relationship didn't end innocently. After leaving the coffee shop, I called Ryan. Where are you? After a moment of silence, he said quietly, downstairs at your place. I raised an eyebrow. Wait for me. I have something to tell you. However, Ryan, who was usually calm and composed, seemed hesitant now. I have things to do and will leave soon. You don't need to say certain things, I understand. I laughed coldly. Ryan, when did you become such a coward? After saying this, I left him with, wait for me, and hung up. When I took a taxi back to the neighborhood, it was 20 minutes later. Downstairs, I immediately spotted Ryan, leaning against a streetlight, one hand in his pocket, the other slightly raised with a half-smoked cigarette between his fingers. Seeing me, Ryan stubbed out his cigarette and tossed it into a nearby trash can. I walked over to see Ryan deliberately putting on a straight face, leaning against the streetlight and looking at me. This person was silent for a while, then asked in a low voice, "What did you want to say?" "Go ahead." My gaze fell on his tense jawline. I deliberately teased him. "I'll give you a chance. Guess what I want to say." Ryan rubbed his hand on his pocket, then couldn't help but take out a cigarette and light it. In the swirling smoke, I couldn't clearly see the emotion in his eyes. I only heard him speak low, his voice deep. "You and Dylan got back together?" When the smoke cleared, I could see his face clearly. This guy was pretending not to care as he asked casually, but his eyes nervously glanced at me. He was actually quite tsundere. I couldn't help but curve my lips, but this action seemed to have a different meaning in his eyes. His brow furrowed tighter. "If you still like him, I wish you well. But you need to think clearly about whether you can accept that past, whether you're really compatible." I smiled as I stared at him. "Don't you have anything you want to say to me?" Ryan was startled and looked away. The usually mature and steady man now had his gaze fixed on the ground, his voice gentle. "Nothing to say. I wish you happiness. Also, I can repeat what I said before. If you change your mind, come find me anytime." Ryan couldn't finish the last word, "me," because I had sealed his lips with mine. In the drizzling rain, neither of us had umbrellas, and I stood on my tiptoes, cupped his face, and kissed him. "Ryan, as a boss, how can you be such a coward too?" Ryan froze. He gently placed his hands on my shoulders, looked down at me, still seeming unable to process what happened. So I changed my mind and came to find you. Am I welcome? Ryan was stunned for a long time, then pulled me into his arms, his chin resting on top of my head and nuzzling. Always welcome. The end.